Hello and welcome to the Revolut Insider podcast, where we explore Revolut's rocket ship from the inside out, one episode at a time. I'm your host, Alex Carril, and joining me today is Mark Sade, Head of Product for Credit. Hi, Mark. Welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you for being here. Mark, you are the Head of Product for all things credit related here at Revolut.
Yeah, that's correct.
And I know this is a department that's seen a lot of growth over the past few years and is just expected to continue increasing.
Yep, we're still in day one.
Well, it'll be nice to talk to you about your contributions around credit at Revolut, how you and your team overcome the challenges of realizing your ideas so they get to market, and also hopefully you can give me a bit of an inside look at what new credit features we can expect to see from Revolut in the future.
No problem.
Great. Let's talk about your current role. Can you shed some light on what goes into being head of product for credit-related features at Revolut?
Yeah, so my job is to define the most efficient roadmap to achieve the company and department goals. I then organize the product teams around achieving those goals and I help them execute. And to be honest, we've built an incredible team in credit to achieve those goals.
Well, I know new features don't just spring up overnight. There's a lot that goes into it, from research and planning to design and development. But what would you say is the basis for coming up with these new features?
I think all the best companies in the world have a clearly defined vision and goals. And, when we come up with those feature ideas or product ideas, we always ask ourselves, is this going to get us the closest possible to our goals? And this is how we ideate.
Okay, so you've addressed the need to go to market. And then what's next? Where do you start and how do you get this new feature out so that customers can use it?
In short, we front load the product thinking as much as possible. We stress test the ideas, then we estimate impact and effort, and this is how we get to a prioritized backlog. Then we pick from the top of the backlog for planning, depending on the capacity we have. And then depending on the item, we do detailed and technical product scoping. Then we go into design, whether it's software architecture or actual product designs. Beyond that, what we do is before we go into detailed and kind of low-level engineering, building, and so on, what we do is we try to test our ideas with real users. We try to test prototypes and designs to try and see if we're getting close to solving the problem before making bigger investment. And once we're comfortable, we just go for it with typical quality and speed that's expected from a Revolut team.
And can you give me an example of something you've worked on to conceptualize this idea and kind of take me through the life cycle?
Sure thing. I think it would be interesting to talk about how we maybe started credit products at Revolut. We started by launching loans and credit cards in Lithuania, which is where we have our European banking license. So this is where we started off. Now we're available across continental Europe and Australia, and we're looking at expansion markets beyond. So when I joined 5 years ago, there was really nothing related to credit in the product suite. And so we sat down and we thought, okay, what makes sense to start with? We went back to the company goals. We realized, okay, if we want to be our customers' primary bank, we need to be able to cater to the essential credit needs. When you think of credit for our retail customers, after mortgages, really a credit card for daily purchases and loans for borrowing a large sum of money for one-off bigger purchases like, wedding, buying a car, renovating your house, and so on, were the two main things that came to mind. And so this is how we started discovering, okay, how can we execute on those products, which are basic necessities, but completely revolutionize and make things 10x simpler and of better value. And so the way we started with this is we looked at the market. Clearly, there's demand for the product. We looked at how competitors do it. And then quickly, we started seeing that our competitors ask tens of questions. They take sometimes days to give them funds once the user is approved and accepts the offer. And then beyond that, once you get the money, managing your loan, is not as seamless as it should be. So what we did is we went down to first principles and we started saying, okay, why can we not do this faster? Why can we not make this experience just clearer, free of jargon, all the while obviously respecting all the regulations that are here to protect the customer?
Of course.
The other challenge is we've known from the get-go that we want to scale this product. So yes, we were scoping it for the first market, but we were starting to think, okay, can this work and can this scale across the rest of Europe and then in fact, the rest of the world. And so for that, we expanded our research. So we didn't do market research just for one country. We expanded it to as many countries as we possibly could to find the common denominators that would allow us to scale. And as a matter of fact, this front-loaded research that we did at the start and scoping is what helped us get to where we are in a short few years, which was never been done by any other fintech.
It's incredible.
I think so too. Once the discovery was done, we moved quite fast on detailed scoping and then execution. We went to market quite fast. I think it was 6 to 9 months of build, and for the entire credit infrastructure. Early testing went really well, and the rest is history.
Yeah. Hearing this thought process, the whole idea was really to make things as simple as possible.
Absolutely. I think this is the design philosophy at Revolut anyway. So, if it's useless, it shouldn't be. Really, we try to give you access to value with as little effort as possible.
Makes sense. And what made you decide we're going to choose loans first instead of credit cards, for example?
We launched credit cards, I think 3 months after loans. So we did things in parallel. But I think what we found out is just loans is a simpler product to execute on. Credit card is a more complex product. So it took us a little bit longer, but not much longer. And since then, we've been scaling both.
And what's been the impact since you first launched loans in 2020?
Without giving away too much, I think the market response for the product has been fantastic. To be really honest, we didn't expect it, but the NPS, Net Promoter Score for the product, is I think amongst the top at Revolut. And I think with loans, we're getting very close to finding product market fit. I think it's one of those signs that tell you like, okay, if your customers are rating you so highly, then it means that you're solving a problem in the right way for them.
Definitely. And this NPS score is a score that's given to us by customers.
It's essentially how likely are you to recommend this product to a friend? It's essentially a survey that we send out.
Okay, so a customer wants to have a loan. How do they actually work?
As a customer, you can start the application within your mobile app, as it is for any other Revolut feature. It takes minutes to get an offer on the loan. And from there, you accept the offer and you get the funds disbursed instantly into your wallet. And it's up to 30,000 euros, for example, in countries like Ireland. And from there, we make it super easy to manage. So you can set the repayment date of your choice. If you want to repay early, it's free and it's in 2-3 clicks. You can set up multiple different repayment sources so that you don't have to worry about whether, you're going to meet the monthly payment obligations and so on. There's a host of other small features also that just remove the headache from managing your loan. We really make it easy.
You mentioned it takes a matter of minutes. So when we talk about disrupting the financial industry, this is an example of that, because with traditional financial institutions, this usually isn't the case. It takes a lot longer to get a loan approved.
There are some competitors that have some of those features like instant dispersal and so on, but fundamentally, we've made it easier and just much more streamlined than any of the competitors. The thing to understand is what our competitors do in one country, we've managed to do in multiple countries with a handful of the people that they have. And that's despite the regulations, right? That typically puts off competitors from venturing into the credit space. And I think as a result, what we've done has never been done by any company before us. We're now doing the same thing with credit cards, mortgages, and many more products to come.
And talking about teams, you mentioned that different institutions might have a different team based in those countries to do that. And at Revolut, we have a centralized team that's managing these features from a global perspective, but localizing them to each region.
Yeah, totally. The challenge with credit is that it's a very regulated industry, with the difference being that the regulations are quite local. So local governments have different ways of dealing with and prescribing rules and regulations for how to run a credit business. But still, we didn't shy away from the challenge of saying, okay, how do we not recreate product team per country and sort of start from scratch every single time? And instead had an approach which is, okay, we have this baseline country. What are the increments in rules, regulations? And then what you end up finding is it's not that the rules are completely different. It's the local flavor, if I may, is slightly different, but the principles are the same with credit. It's all about protecting users from unresponsible borrowing, right? You want to make sure that you're lending money to users who can afford it, such that you protect them from harm in that sense.
Exactly, yeah.
And the fundamentals of doing that are the same everywhere. The interpretation and the different nuances is what makes the challenge tricky. But I think we're managing to scale those products in the right spirit and compliance with the regulation.
You're doing it. You had mentioned that there are some markets coming up soon too. So it'll be exciting to see which markets they are. Or can you give us a little insight?
Yeah, of course. With credit, we're expanding across a couple more markets in Europe, which you will hear about soon on the news. And it's quite known that we're also expanding in LATAM, so starting with Mexico and Brazil. And from there, nothing confirmed yet, but yeah, stay tuned.
So as head of product for credit, how do you manage a team that is navigating new markets and not exactly sure where they're going? How do you lead that direction?
There are 2 dimensions to this. There's a global vision that we're trying to achieve, which is similar everywhere. And that is to become the primary bank for our users. And for this, when it comes down to credit, the products and the features that are required to make this vision come to life are somewhat similar. Right? People need to pay for their everyday groceries. They need to buy their first car. They need to move into their first house, right? So those problems are commonplace across the globe. The other dimension is regulations. And the big question is how to navigate regulations across those different countries, because it's not like most of other Revolut features where it's, let's say, instant scale from day zero. For us, it's about figuring out how to quickly understand local regulation frameworks and scale fast, and then meet product market fit in each of the markets. So those are the challenges that we face. And the way we solve it is by this collaboration between a core global product team that services all the markets. And we work with local professionals on the ground in each of the markets that understand the local regulations and can help us quickly navigate those environments such that we're able to deliver value as fast as possible. But the collaboration between the two is quite key.
I can imagine. I mean, that's kind of what you need, this dream team to help realize this goal.
Yeah, absolutely. I think if you're trying to scale a global business, launching is one thing, but finding product market fit is another. For both challenges, you need to, again, understand the local regulatory frameworks, but also the local customers.
Of course.
And for both situations, it's very useful to have people on the ground that are themselves your potential customers.
Exactly.
And can help you really fundamentally understand how people deal with credit in those countries.
Definitely. Well, on that note, we're going to take a quick break. And then I want to ask you, Mark, about the challenges you encounter when coming up with new credit features. And maybe you can give a little more of a sneak peek into what features may be on their way soon.
Yeah, let's do it.
We'll be right back with more Insider Views. This episode is brought to you by Revolut Savings. Grow your savings faster with interest paid daily at excellent rates with instant access. Open an account in seconds and see your money grow, compound, and increase every single day. Make your money make money with Revolut Savings. Interest rates vary by plan. Plan fees and savings terms and conditions apply. We are back on the Revolut Insider podcast with Head of Product, Mark Sade, who oversees all things credit related here at Revolut.
Hi again.
Mark, before the break, we were talking about getting things to market, finalizing a feature so that customers can open their app and use it. I'm sure this process isn't without its challenges. What would you say are the biggest ones you've had to overcome working in the credit capacity?
For me, I think the reason for which tech companies in general and customer-centric companies have shied away from operating in the credit space is because, again, of the complex regulations that come with this responsibility. And what we're left with really is legacy players who are very averse to risk. They just don't like to deal with risk. And as a result, what they do is they just comply with regulations while putting the product and customer experience as an afterthought. So for me, really, the question was, how can we embrace regulations while building amazing experiences? Because I think that this is the recipe to win in this space. And I think the biggest challenge has been getting into this mindset and bringing people with me without going back into, the kind of traditional way of doing banking. And that's been the biggest challenge, but also one of the most rewarding things in my career.
I can imagine. And when you're coming up with these solutions, is there a very kind of clear box that you have to stay within, or does it require more creative thinking?
For sure, creative thinking is key here, because fundamentally what we're trying to do is take products that in some cases are thousands of years old and just making them 10x better. To do that, you have to go to first principle. You have to go down to the binary. So why does it work this way? What does this piece of regulation that was written maybe years ago really mean? What is it trying to do?
Interesting.
And how can you come up with solutions that still respect the spirit of the regulation while making the customer experience 10x better? So yeah, definitely being able to dig deep into a problem and finding creative solutions for them is absolutely critical.
And you mentioned earlier that a lot of these legacy players are risk averse or don't want to dive into the regulation, so they don't have these features designed with the customer in mind. But why wouldn't you do this, right? Why wouldn't you create these features with the customer point of view, number one?
It's a good question. And to me, by competing with them, I realized that, I mean, they've been around for, in some cases, hundreds of years, right? They've had tens of millions of customers for hundreds of years. So why bother, right?
True.
So as I said, tech companies have, so far at least, shied away from competing with them on credit because it's complicated.
Yeah.
It's difficult. But I think this is about to change very soon.
Well, it's nice to be in the forefront of the innovation.
And we move very fast.
Yeah.
So I think we're onto something here.
And let me ask you, Mark, have you always been one to come up with creative solutions?
So I don't like friction when I don't understand it. So there's some useful friction and some useless friction. And I learned that it's much better to front load the friction when you're problem solving. So either you problem solve well, which is where the friction will start and happen, and then you create a solution that is frictionless, or you're lazy at the problem solving stage, but then the friction will remain when we talk about the solution. So if you do that and you don't settle in removing friction for the user at problem solving stage, you're definitely building great solutions. So, when I work with more traditional bankers, they tend to suggest solutions to problems without really challenging them at the binary level. And so I challenge them and they don't like it. In the end, though, that friction takes us to a first principles conversation. And from there, we get to build solutions that remove tons of friction for our customers. And this is how we got to build this sort of scalable infrastructure that we have today.
While making it easier, like you mentioned, for customers and giving them this access that they wouldn't have otherwise.
For us, this is a red line. Revolut is a product-led company. So at the end of the day, if it's not the best product that we can put out, we just won't do it.
Did you always want to get into products and new features?
Not really. I mean, product as a profession, came about very recently in relative terms.
I know, who really grows up and thinks, I want to get into product?
Yeah, I mean, now you could well grow up thinking that.
True,
but
yeah.
For my generation, not really. It's quite a new role. But when I found out about it, I was totally drawn to the idea of working in, very diverse teams in terms of skill set to build software that solves real problems. And yeah, I just see our job as an evolution of what previous inventors did, although by no means we come close to their achievements, but the spirit is the same, really. We're problem solvers at the core, and we do this, and our problem solving manifests through something that people use every day, which is awesome.
What would you tell someone who may be considering a career in this field?
Yeah, I think it's a great job for people with a wide set of skills that love problem solving in the context of software. So the skills you gain will also help you create your own company if that's something that excites you in the future.
The future. This is a good point to ask you, what's next? What's next for Revolut when it comes to credit-related features?
The one I'm really excited about is mortgages. I can't tell you much just yet, but I believe we're one of the first fintechs to really dig into what I think at least is a huge customer problem and I think a broken product today, really. So stay tuned. We're working quite hard on that at the moment.
Wow, a mortgage through an app. That's quite impressive. When I think of mortgage, I think a large sum of money. I don't think just, a few thousand euros when you talk about a personal and secured loan. So how would this work?
So for most of us, really, buying a house is going to be the largest purchase we ever make. Therefore, you want to make this fast, seamless, easy. But I think what is very important with mortgages is going to be the support that you bring to users in that transaction. So it's a big deal for a lot of people. And so while you make it fast and seamless, you also want to bring them all the information that they need every single step of the way.
Definitely.
It's not a thing that you get in minutes, it's a thing you get in days. And so what's going to be crucial for us is finding that balance between, easy and seamless and fast, but also providing support at the right points in time when you need to make a big decision. So this is the nuance compared to other products that
Makes
we
sense.
currently offer.
That is exciting. Is there anything else we can expect this year or maybe early next year?
Early next year, we're working on a bunch of other features. So we're going to roll out overdrafts in some key markets where the feature is in demand, like, for example, France and Germany. And that's also aligned to the goal of becoming primary bank for our customers. But early next year, we're also venturing into the business lending space. So, for a business, credit is lifeblood. You need credit to operate on the day-to-day for cash flow, working capital, but you also need credit to grow and invest into your growth. So it's quite important for business customers, critical actually. And yeah, we're super excited to get into that space.
And do you know which markets this is going to be seen in first?
I think we'll start in our biggest market across Europe. So think of places like France, Germany, Spain, and so on. But then, as with every other product and feature, we're going to scale it globally.
Amazing.
We're also expanding on our credit cards value proposition. So we're scaling across new markets like Mexico and Brazil, but we're also going deeper into those markets. The markets are completely different. So when you think of credit cards in Europe versus Latin America, competitors have very different value propositions, and we're going to localize and go deep into every single market from this year, and you'll start seeing updates from early next year as well.
Neat. Is there any sneak peek that you can give us of what these credit cards might offer, something special that they might have? Because I know Rev Points was released earlier this year. So will there be some kind of connection there maybe?
Yeah, absolutely. So Rev Points are going to be part of our credit cards proposition. And then there'll be much more that we're exploring with partnerships and redemption options with the points for credit cards.
Yeah, well, a lot to look forward to. After 5 years of Revolut creating and launching these industry-breaking features that hundreds of thousands of people are using, what would you say is the biggest lesson you've learned along the way?
If you want to change the world, you have to be willing to go down to first principles when you're problem solving. So a lot of things are done in a way today because of the status quo. It doesn't matter how experienced you are or what you do, your background. If you're able to get to the bottom of any problem, and understand it at its core with perseverance and logic, you can solve it.
And what would you tell yourself when you were just starting out in your career?
When you're solving a problem, you're well within your rights to challenge anyone, however experienced they are and however young you are. And if they cannot explain how or why something works the way it does, it means that they don't get it. And you have an opportunity here to make a change. And it happened several times in my career. And it was very uncomfortable to have those conversations. But I truly believe that this is how we end up solving big problems and achieving great things.
I like that. I like that, challenge the status quo. And the idea is so that you can make things better.
Yeah, it's quite simple, really.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much, Mark, again, for being on the show and sharing your experience that you've had at Revolut and how you're making credit accessible to more people.
My pleasure.
And for those listening, thank you. You can add the podcast to your favorites so you don't miss an episode, and follow us on Instagram at Revolut Insider. Thanks for tuning in to the Revolut Insider podcast, where we explore Revolut's rocket ship from the inside out. Until next time, remember, the sky is not the limit, it's just the beginning. Revolut, change the way you money.